Hello, everyone. This is Michael. I'm on my rock and roll soapbox today, and we are going to talk about the Led Zeppelin live catalog. Led Zeppelin, of course, is a legendary 1970s rock band that essentially ruled the world, selling millions and tens of millions of records, selling out stadiums and arenas throughout the decade, and becoming a legend in the process, so much so that even today, nearly 50 years later, actually 50 years later, young people learning Led Zeppelin's music and learning to embrace the great catalog that they created over their lifetimes. Most people are familiar with their studio output. You can hear a good 2 or 3 dozen songs played every day on classic rock radio stations by Led Zeppelin, so we're not going to go over that today. Instead, we're going to talk about their live catalog. Led Zeppelin, like many bands in the 70s, were known for their live shows. A Led Zeppelin concert was a 2.5, 3 hour extravaganza, whatever. When they came to town, it was a must-see show for any rock fan. They had they did not have super massive, pyrotechnics and all that stuff, but they did have a lot going on. I mean, there was a point on every show when Jimmy Page would be waist deep in dry ice, playing his guitar with a violin bow while a pyramid of lasers circled around him. So they did have special effects and things like that. But for the most part, it was just the 4 guys on stage playing their music. And you would get a 2.5 hour or 3 hour show. And we're going to go through their various live releases today, and I'm going to help you understand what they have, what they offer, what's good, what's bad, etc. Now, one of the things that was very frustrating as a Led Zeppelin fan during the 70s and all the way through the mid-90s was that there was very little live music available to purchase. In fact, this album, The Song Remains the Same, I have the original CD version right here. That was the only release that was available until 1994. So, if you were a Led Zeppelin fan, until 1994, the only live Led Zeppelin that you could purchase that was an official release was The Song Remains the Same, which was a soundtrack to the album that came out in 1976 or 77, I think. And while I love this album, if you can see here, right here, I give every song on it except one a 5-star rating, which means I loved it. The only one I don't, I give the lowest rating I possibly can, which is 1 star, 20%, which is a 12-minute drum solo, 11-minute drum solo. So during this time, when Led Zeppelin was Led Zeppelin in the 70s, and you attended a Led Zeppelin concert, there were 4 songs that were almost certain to be played, and when they were played, they would be lengthy, and they would be combined. They'd take up maybe half or more than half of the show. Those songs were, number 1, Dazed and Confused, which they'd been played. I think every Led Zeppelin concert in the 70s featured Dazed and Confused, from their very first shows until their very last. And they would always feature Jimmy Page doing a violin, playing his guitar with a violin bow, and it would be very dramatic, and they'd have lots of special effects and things like that. It could be as long as, I think, let's take a look. Let's see what my longest version of Dazed and Confused is. Yeah, there's a 40-minute version from a bootleg that I have in 1975, and you can see I got more that are 30 minutes. So this could be, it just got longer and longer as their career went on, and frankly, it got too long in my opinion. Now, the version that appears on The Song Remains the Same is 27 minutes, so it's exceedingly long, but I consider it the definitive version of Dazed and Confused that is available. I'll tell a little bit more about that in a minute. But you would always get Dazed and Confused. Second, you would always get the John Bonham drum solo, which in this case, on The Song Remains the Same, is 11 minutes. But I have bootleg versions that are as long as 30 minutes long. And an 11-minute drum solo by John Bonham is excruciating. I cannot imagine what a 30-minute drum solo. Look, I love John Bonham. He's one of the greatest rock and roll drummers ever. But in terms of drum solos, he's just not very entertaining. Really, the only drummer that I know of that created entertaining drum solos was Neil Peart. Everybody else's are pretty boring, in my opinion. So you get Dazed and Confused, you get Moby Dick, you'd get No Quarter, which would feature John Paul Jones, who's normally the bass player, but he also plays the piano, electric piano, organ, whatever you want to call it. And No Quarter would feature him during that song, and it started out originally as about a 10-minute song, which is about what it was on the studio version. But over time, that song also grew in length. And I think there's like 25, I got versions that are 25 to 30 minutes long. So you'd always get those three featuring solos by Jimmy Page, John Bonham, or John Paul Jones. Dazed and Confused, Moby Dick, No Quarter. And then the fourth song that you would always hear would be a very extended version of Whole Lotta Love. This was only about a 3-minute song on the studio album, but on stage they would stretch it out to 15, sometimes even 20, 23 minutes long. And that the core part of it is that they would play a medley of old, like 50s rockabilly tunes, often in the middle of it. And they might string together 6 or 8 songs, bits and pieces of 6 or 8 songs. And so they really weren't playing A Whole Lot of Love. They were doing this, kind of covers medley as part of it. And then they'd bring it back to A Whole Lot of Love at the end. But you would always get those 4 things. So when The Song Remains the Same came out, you got all that. You got No Quarter, you got Dazed and Confused, you got Moby Dick, and you got Whole Lotta Love. So you got those 4 songs, which were kind of like the necessary ingredients that had to be included because every Led Zeppelin show had those. It would. And I think that, like, for instance, the Moby Dick is included because this is a soundtrack. The original, The Song Remains the Same, was a movie. This is a soundtrack to it. The movie featured the drum solo, so you had to feature the drum solo on the track. But otherwise, I absolutely love this album. We're going to listen to one song off it in a minute, Rain Song. Like I said, I consider this version of Dazed and Confused to be the definitive version, and I love it beginning to end. It's arguably my favorite Jimmy Page guitar workout because that song from beginning to end, the 27-minute version, he is killing it on the guitar. I also consider this version of No Quarter to be the definitive version of No Quarter. It doesn't suffer from being too long. On some of the longer versions, John Paul Jones ends up sounding like he's playing lounge piano, and it takes away from the moody, swampy, kind of sinister sound that the song, that is the mood of the song, especially on this live version. This live version, the mood set in it is just awesome. Sorry, I had the wrong song there. I meant No Quarter. So The Song Remains the Same. This is the original version. They came out with an extended version in 2003, but for us Led Zeppelin fans, until 1994, this was it. These 9 songs. This is all we had. These 9 songs. And for a band whose reputation was as much for their live shows as their studio output, that was very frustrating to me throughout that period. Now, I was only 10 years old in the 70s, but I was a big fan and I liked a lot of live music, so it's frustrating to me that no live music was released until later. So let's listen to one of my favorite songs from this album. It is Rain Song, which in the movie features Robert Plant doing his fantasy sequence. However, the song itself is kind of delicate, and what I like about it is the way it switches from being delicate and light to kind of strong and powerful. there's a lot of quiet moments in it, just mostly Jimmy Page guitar playing, and it's not fancy, fast, aggressive playing. It's delicate, light, and slow frequently. And then Robert Plant doesn't sing a lot in it, and the arrangement is odd. Like, he starts out singing, he sings a verse at the beginning, and then you've got about 3 or 4 minutes of music without any singing, and then he comes in and sings some more later. So it's an interesting arrangement. His vocals are great, and this is my favorite version of this song. I think it's better than the studio version, and let's listen to it.
It is the springtime of my loving, the second season I'm to know. You are the sunlight in my growing, so little warmth I felt before. Eyes and heart to feel me glowing. I watched the fire that grew so low. Oh, it is the summer of my smiles. Flee from me, keepers of the gloom. Speak to It is to you I give this tune. It isn't hard to recognize. Oh, these things are clear to all from time to time. Oh. These are the seasons of emotion, and like the wind, they rise and fall. This is a wonder of devotion. I see the torch we all must hold. And people, this is a mystery of the quotient. Upon us all, a little rain must fall. Just a little rain. I know.
That's exactly what I'm talking about when I say Led Zeppelin just crushed it live, because that is such, they combine so many cool things in that song. The arrangement is just genius, so interesting. I'm sure John Paul Jones came up with that. His keyboard work there, which made it sound like he was conducting a symphony, even though it's just him on a single electric, I don't know what it is, electric piano or an organ or synthesizer. I think it's some kind of organ. John Bonham's drumming, as dull as his solos are, he knocks that stuff out of this kind of stuff where it's almost kind of like a theatrical with he's got the big timpani drums and he's doing these rolls and he's got the gong and of course Robert Plant's singing is just awesome throughout the song. That is an awesome song. Okay, so as much as I loved that album, it's all I could listen to until 1994 when Jimmy Page and Robert Plant got together to do their unleaded thing. And that was really cool. And they released an album. Now, all these songs on here are not really live. Some of these are more like videos, but many of them really are live. Like this one, 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 and this one. All of those were recorded in, I believe, a London sound stage in front of a live audience. The others are recorded in different places and might be kind of live or more like a music video. I'm a big fan of this album too. This is when it wasn't just four guys on stage. This was Jimmy and Robert, and then they were using the band that had backed Robert Plant on his two previous albums, which were, three previous albums. Fate of Nations. I can't remember the other two right now. Now and Zen, and the one in the middle, I can't remember. Anyway, so it was Jimmy, Robert, the band that was backing Robert Plant's solo career at the time, and then they had a whole kind of what they called a world symphony, which is a bunch of people playing instruments that would be called they were like third world type instruments, and so a lot of things that you could bang on, some odd stringed instruments and things like that. So this was different, and so the songs were different and they sounded different, and that was cool. And so we got like 8 or 10 of their classic songs done, but done in a different way. From this album, there are definitive versions of Gallows Pole, That's the Way. Now that's the way. I say it's the definitive version. It's not that different from some other ones. There's another one that's almost as good in my opinion. Battle of Evermore. This is the only live version of the Battle of Evermore that I know of. Why does my computer keep freaking out at me? You know what it is? It's this stupid thing. I believe this is the only live version of Battle of Evermore in existence. The live version of Kashmir is the definitive version of Kashmir that you can find. So this is a really good album, and we're going to listen to... what are we going to listen to? Stop. We're going to listen to Thank You. Okay, so like I said, this is one candidate for the definitive version, live version of Thank You that we have here. This is pretty straightforward version of it, actually, that mimics what you hear on the studio album, but the studio album was kind of hard to replicate live, so they kind of made some changes. Like the guitar sounds harder here. It's not as delicate as it is in the original studio. But let's check it out. We're going to listen to Thank You from the No Quarter Jimmy Page Robert Plant album from 1994.
Still be loving you. If mountains come to the sea, baby, there would still be you and me. Hey. Kind woman, I give you my all. Kind woman, nothing drops of rain, whisper of the pain day my world it smiles. Your hand in mine, we walk miles. Thanks to you, you know we'll be done, baby, baby. Oh yeah, 'cause you to me are the only one, the only one, the only one. Oh yeah. Young woman, I give you my all. Young woman, nothing more. So if the sun refused to shine, oh, I'll still be loving you. If mountains crumble to the sea, baby, baby, there would still be you and me, you and me. Oh, I want to thank you. Oh yeah, I'm gonna thank you. Oh yeah. Hey.
So, as you can tell, that is while it sticks to what the original song does, it's also quite different. You know, when it's got that Jimmy Page guitar solo at the end, Robert Plant throws the bum, ba-bum, ba-bum vocals over the end. You don't have the false fade out at the end with the organ like shows up on the studio album. So it's really quite different. And in many ways better, in my opinion. I love both versions. I think the studio version is the definitive version. However, that is a very close second. Second point I want to make is, so we've now got, let me sort these by, and they are sorted. So both of these releases that came out were essentially video projects. Song Remains the Same was a film, and Unleaded was like, you know, mega version of an unplugged session from MTV. So they both designed for video, and so we're listening to the audio from what was really a video thing. And so because of that, they're not like, these are not entire concerts where you hear everything, and that was always a bit frustrating to me. But still, to have new live music from Led Zeppelin was super awesome in 1994. And I'm glad they did that whole unleaded, whatever you want to call it thing, the page event. I wish they'd included John Paul Jones on it, and I don't know why they didn't. There's never been a satisfactory answer to that. I think John Paul Jones himself is a bit miffed that he was not included. All right, so moving on. So we're now in 1998, and so 1998 is 18 years after Led Zeppelin broke up, and 29 years since they first came out in 1969, and yet we had a total of, what is that, about 180, so about 3 hours of live music. So only 2 releases, but about 3 hours. That's one thing to note about The Song Remains the Same. This came out in the 70s when you had LPs, and an LP was 20 minutes each side, so a double live album. A lot of bands did a double live album, and you'd get about 80 minutes of music. Some would be cheaper and only get about 70, 75. But Led Zeppelin crammed almost 100 minutes of music on theirs. So they were not ripping their fans off. They were giving them a lot of really good music, including the 27-minute version of Dazed and Confused, which had to be crammed onto, why is that, say 518? It should be like 20, I think it's 2656, and I don't know why I remember that. Oh, that's 2656. I see what's going on there. I got a bad formatting thing. I'll fix you. That's how you get 97 minutes on 2 LPs. All right, so that's what we had all the way up until 1998. And then, out of the blue, this drops. The Led Zeppelin BBC Sessions. There was not much promotion or hype before this came out. It was like it just, all of a sudden it was there. And this was really super gold to me personally, because I'm such a big Led Zeppelin fan and such a fan of their live work. And this release consisted of 2 CDs, and you can see one was a full 77 minutes and the other was an even fuller 79. So they crammed a lot of, that's almost 160 minutes of music crammed into these 2 CDs. And you can see that I think very highly of both. I think very highly of second CD, and the first CD is and here's why. Let's look at the songs that show up on both of these. Alright, so we're going here. This is the first CD, okay? These were recorded between 1969 and 1971, I believe, most of these. We got You Shook Me, and then we got You Shook Me Again. We got Communication Breakdown, and then Communication Breakdown again, and then Communication Breakdown a third time. We got I Can't Quit You Baby, and then we got I Can't Quit You Baby a second time. So there's a lot of duplication here. Now you could take those, what is that? That's 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 4 songs that are duplicated. We could take those out. But notice, like I Can't Quit You Baby, one's a 4-minute version and then one's a 10-minute version. I'm not a particularly huge fan of the 10-minute version. It's okay. But the totality of it sounds like a bunch of odds and ends that have been slapped together, including a version of a song that does not appear anywhere else in the Led Zeppelin catalog, which is The Girl I Love, She Got Long Black Wavy Hair, which I don't particularly like the song all that much, and at the end it fades out. Now, I assume this is live, but I'm not 100%, because when you listen to it, it doesn't really sound live, and then it just has a very rough fade out where somebody just took the volume knob on the control board and just turned it down. So I'm not saying I don't like these. You can see I got quite a few 4s and a couple 3s, but there are no 5-star rated songs anywhere on this first disc. And so it's okay. Like, if you look at my overall rankings, you can see that's the lowest of all their live releases, is the first CD from this package. CD2, however, oh boy. This was taken from, all of these obviously were broadcast on the BBC, which means that they were also broadcast in America at various times. And therefore they were heavily bootlegged. And this side 2 was probably the most bootlegged Led Zeppelin concert of all time. I'm guessing. I don't know. It was specifically recorded for what they were going to do is they were going to take their live show and do it in a relatively small studio in front of a studio audience and record it for the BBC. It was somewhat of an experiment. And it was also recorded prior to Led Zeppelin 4 coming out. So, for instance, you hear the band playing Stairway to Heaven and the audience has never, ever heard it before. And they politely clap at the end. English audience, like they were in a studio, so it was a little different than being like at a coliseum or an arena or a theater. But nevertheless, the audience is really quite reserved and polite throughout. I don't know if that's an English thing that was common back then, but I know if you did that in America, the people would have been going insane and screaming and yelling. But this disc, these 10 songs presented in order is just high octane greatness. You got the Immigrant Song, Heartbreaker. This is let's see the definitive versions of Black Dog. So this was on the 4th album, so nobody had heard this before. The definitive version of Since I've Been Loving You, which is another concert staple that didn't feature anybody in terms of a solo like Moby Dick or Dazed and Confused, but it was played in almost every Led Zeppelin show throughout the 70s. The definitive version and live version of Immigrant Song. This version of Thank You is every bit as good as the one that we just listened to. It's the one that I said that's almost as good. And then the Whole Lotta Love medley. You notice this is significantly shorter than the version that showed up on The Song Remains the Same, which was 14 minutes. And here, so it's about the same. I'm totally wrong. It's almost the same. This one has a different group of songs that they play in the middle, and it's fun. This one is a little more fun than the version from The Song Remains the Same. But they're both excellent. I love both of them. And this show just does not miss. It's also, That's the Way, the version of that we hear on here, Going to California. This is something that Led Zeppelin did throughout their shows in the 70s, is they would take a break, bring out stools, sit down, and play 3 or 4 acoustic songs. And this is in the mid-70s, predating MTV Unplugged by 15 years. And that was a staple of Led Zeppelin shows throughout then. And you got a little bit of it on this disc right here when they did Going to California and That's the Way together. So let's listen to... What are we going to listen to? We're going to listen to That's the Way. And I really like this version. And you can just see the guys sitting on stage just playing these acoustic instruments, playing this. It sounds like that, and it sounds really cool. At one point at the very end, you can hear Robert Plant, who's playing a tambourine. He drops the tambourine on the floor, and you can literally hear it like clank on the floor, which I think is really cool. All right, so let's listen to That's the Way from the BBC sessions, recorded originally in 1971 by Led Zeppelin. Good stuff, as always. I do want to make one quick comment. That show used to get played, not all of it, not all 80 minutes. They'd knock it down to like 60 minutes, and they would play it on something. Saturday nights, it would get played on the radio on FM. Every Saturday night at 10 o'clock, at least where I grew up, one of the stations would play I don't know if it's the King Biscuit Flower Hour or something like that. But that show would get played about once every year. And I remember one time I captured it on a really good high quality blank cassette. And I got the entire show perfectly cut. I didn't miss anything. I didn't have commercials accidentally overlapping parts. I captured it perfectly on a 50-minute one-side cassette tape. And I loaned it to this guy that I worked with. And I I never got it back from him. And I was bummed about that for years and years and years. So when this came out in 1998 and I finally got that recording again, I was exceedingly happy. Moving on. So now, at this point, we've got The Song Remains the Same, which is 97 minutes, then No Quarter, which is another 75 minutes, and now we've added another, 160 almost minutes. So we've got quite a significant amount of music at this point, but there was still more to come. In 2003, Led Zeppelin released their DVD package, which I'm going to do a video on Led Zeppelin video at some point. And almost it seems like as a throwaway or as an afterthought, they released How the West Was Won, which is this. 3 CDs. A complete show from 1972. And this was the first time that we got a complete Led Zeppelin show released on live as opposed to like on a video or something like that. This was awesome. So at this point, they were at their peak. This is Led Zeppelin at their, rock god apex. They were touring the United States. It was recorded in, I think, Long Beach and another show out west, maybe Los Angeles. I don't know. They got the complete show, and this was before Led Zeppelin Houses of the Holy had come out. And even though there are songs from Houses of the Holy on it, you'll see Over the Hills and Far Away, Dancing Days, The Ocean. Those are all songs from Houses of the Holy that were included, but these had not come out yet. So they were really touring support of Led Zeppelin 4, the album. Now, this was the beginning of the tour before the album came out while they were touring, and then the show that we found later that made up The Song Remains the Same is essentially from the same tour, but by this point, the House of the Holy had been released, and House of the Holy had become a bigger part of the set list. So we only have 3 songs on this, How the West Was Won. As you can see, I like many of these songs. The definitive versions from this, in my opinion, I don't have any listed. That doesn't make sense to me. Bronny R. Stomp. And that's the only one. So if you go back to this, remember I talked about how they would do the acoustic bit. You can see that right here. You got Going to California, That's the Way, and Bronny R. Stomp. Those are all acoustic songs. We're going to listen to Bronny R. Stomp. I'm realizing now that the songs that I picked here are all like quiet, delicate songs. Rain Song is quite delicate throughout a lot of it. That's the Way, what we listened to just a minute ago, is all acoustic. Bronny R. Stomp, which we're listening to, is all acoustic. Thank You is relatively, it's not Heartbreaker or Black Dog. At the time, this is just pure gold. To get an entire show from when Zeppelin was at their peak, and notice there's no quarter. There's no version of No Quarter. Because they hadn't started playing that yet, because this, like I said, this is before Houses of the Holy was released. There's also no Moby Dick, so we don't have a 12-minute drum solo anywhere in here. I assume there was one played. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe they didn't do Moby Dick during this time. I always assumed that they did Moby Dick on every one of their shows, but now that I think about it, apparently not. So in terms of set list, this stuff is really, really good. The band was at the top. We don't have 30-minute versions of No Quarter. We don't have long extended drum solos. The only thing I don't like is this version of Whole Lotta Love is my least favorite version of these long ones. This one just goes on too long. As you can see, this is 23 minutes, which is a good 10 minutes longer than what we had on The Song Remains the Same and 10 minutes longer than the version from the BBC tapes that we had. All right, well, let's listen to Bronny R. Stomp, which is a fun song. It's acoustic, but Jimmy Page puts a workout on this acoustic guitar, and it's kind of fun to sing along and bang along with. So let's listen to it. Bronny R. Stomp from How the West Was Won by Led Zeppelin from 1972. Yeah, so that's a pretty fun song. All right, so let's go back and check out where we are. So now we've got a lot of live music, and we have representations. Look at these when these were recorded. So we've got 71, 72, 73, 70, 71. So all of those, other than No Quarter, which was 90s, so this is much, good 15 years after they originally broke up. All the other stuff is essentially from those 4 or 5 years in the early part of their career when they were really at their creative peak. And so you're really getting the band performing when they were their best. Now then, shortly after that, in 2007, okay, shortly, 4 years later, they released an extended version of The Song Remains the Same. And what they did is they added all the songs that were played at the shows that were recorded but were excluded from the original soundtrack. So it looks like this. Looks exactly the same, but now it folds out and you've got 2 complete CDs. And if we look at it from a song perspective, we can see here. All right, so we have all the original songs. We've added Black Dog, Over the Hills and Far Away, Misty Mountain Hop. So Over the Hills and Far Away, Misty Mountain Hop are from Houses of the Holy. So these had been added to the playlist after that show that we just listened to from LA from earlier in the tour. Notice also The Song Remains the Same and the Rain song had been introduced. But this is now a complete version of that show. And when I say that show, I need to clarify something. It's not one show. The video, the film that was recorded to make the movie was recorded in 2 places, Baltimore and New York City. The shows in New York City, I believe, are the only ones used. But there were 4 nights at Madison Square Garden that were recorded. And so you're not getting a complete one show. You're getting bits and pieces of 4 different shows. And if you listen to you can take a song that was on the original The Song Remains the Same, let's say Dazed and Confused. You can listen to it on the extended version. It's a different version, or at least there's parts of it that are different than what we hear on the original. In fact, let me show you something here. So this is comparing the original verse, what's on this extended version of The Song Remains the Same. So for instance, if you look at Dazed and Confused, 26:56, I was right, by the way, on the original, 29:18 on this extended version. So you're getting 2+ minutes. Now, I don't know if some of that is just audience cheering at the beginning or the end. What I do know is that when I listen to it, there are parts where I go, oh, that's different than what I heard on the original release that I know note for note. I know these original versions. I know these inside out. And so when I listen to these versions on the extended, sometimes they differ just a little bit. Sometimes there's a part added, sometimes a part that's taken out, which is why these song lengths are different than what they were on the original release. The other thing I want to mention is, like I said, this is all a soundtrack to what was the original film, and sometimes the versions on the film are different. And so between the original release, the film version, and this extended release, like, you got actually 3 different versions of many of these songs. They don't differ by much, but they are just a little bit different. But you can see then you get these 3 additional songs. One thing I want to do is compare. Like I say, this Song Remains the Same was taken at the end of the tour. It was a tour that started in 72, ended in 73. How the West Was Won was recorded at the beginning of the tour in the U.S., and I just want to show how different they are. Look at all these songs that are on How the West Was Won that was not part of this show. And then you have these songs that were played in New York that were not played in L.A. And the point is this, is obviously they released an album in between, but they would change up their set lists. They didn't play the same 12 songs every night. And then the songs themselves would change. The version of Dazed and Confused here from How the West Was Won, it's not significantly different than what you hear on The Song Remains the Same, but there are a couple parts where it's pretty different. And it was because there were parts in the song that would be spontaneous, or, I don't want to say jamming, but there were parts that they were making up each night that would differ from the night before. All right, so let's listen to, we listened to it already. All right, so that gets us pretty much up to speed until 2007, when the three surviving members of Led Zeppelin, John Paul Jones, Robert Plant, and Jimmy Page, decided to get together to do one single reunion show in memory of Ahmet Ertegun, and I'm not 100% I'm pronouncing the name right. For those who do not know, Ahmet Ertegun was the president and CEO and founder of Atlantic Records, and discovered and produced many, many great artists, including Led Zeppelin, and Robert Plant in particular seemed to be a big fan of his. And so when Ahmet passed away, they did this reunion show. Now, Led Zeppelin had broken up in 1980 when John Bonham passed away, and they had had a few times where they got on stage together before, and every one of them had been pretty disastrous. Most famously, at 1985, they were one of the biggest, most anticipated acts of the Live Aid concert, and they really weren't very good. And they weren't very good because they hadn't practiced, and they hadn't rehearsed, and they hadn't played together in a long time, and they just kind of got up on stage and tried to do it, and it was bad. They had also performed at a previous Atlantic Records, I think 40th anniversary or something like that, in the late 80s, and that show, there's no recording of it, but reportedly things did not go very well at that show as well. Also want to note that the Live Aid show, their performance was so poor that they refused to allow it to be included in the DVD that was eventually released for the Live Aid show. So, I will admit being skeptical in 2007 that they were going to get together 27 years after their last real performance and be able to do anything that lived up to the legacy that they had established with everything that came before it. And I could not have been more wrong. They absolutely crushed it. This, again, was designed as there is a video, but we're talking about the live CDs at this point. Now, Robert Plant kills it in terms of a guy who I think was about 63 or 64 at this point. But his voice is not the same as it is in the early 70s. It's just not. He sounds really good, though, I gotta say. John Paul Jones also sounds really good. Jimmy Page is fine when he's playing rhythm guitars. He struggles a bit with the solos. He just doesn't have the command and the mastery to pull them off, and you can hear him struggling at times. And then Jason Bonham, I'm glad that they got Jason Bonham, so he's as close to John Bonham as you could possibly get. They got his son to play the drums, but Jason has never been the dynamic, creative drummer that John Bonham was, and so he plays the parts well, but he lacks that kind of, flair or whatever you want to call it. The set list for this was, hey, you know what? When you've got 2-hour show and you got to capture the entire history and legacy of Led Zeppelin, it's tough to do. But one of the things I liked about it is they included 5 songs that are not available on any other live release by Led Zeppelin. These are Good Times, Bad Times, which is the very first song from their first album. For Your Life, which is from the album Presence. Nobody's Fault But Mine, which is also from Presence. And Ramble On, and In My Time of Dying. Now, some of those songs, there's video versions available, but none of those songs show up anywhere else on this list until Celebration Day came out. All of these songs are performed pretty well. I'm not a big fan of the Whole Lotta Love version. 64-year-old men probably shouldn't be singing that song. The version of Rock and Roll is also lacking, in my opinion. But those were encores. They came after they did Kashmir. The other thing is, well, I'm not going to talk about that. Like I said, I'm going to do a video review at some point. So overall, I give it a 78 because there's a lot of 4-star songs, but not as many 5-star songs as we see on most of these other releases. Nevertheless, in my opinion, it is an iconic historical document that captured the guys from Led Zeppelin when they were long past when they should have been doing this stuff, and got up on stage and killed it. And everybody in the audience went crazy. The video that captures it is great. This CD is great. It's about as good as can be. And this song, For Your Life, in my, I believe this is the only live version that they ever played. They'd never played it live before this show. And let's listen to that now. Okay. So, For Your Life, from the Celebration Day CD that came out in 2012, but it's from their 2007 reunion show. for guys that are in their 60s playing songs written in the 70s, they do a great job as far as I'm concerned. Alright, so you add all that stuff up, and it really is a super impressive catalog of live music. You can see there's 632 minutes, which is 10 and a half hours, which is almost as much as their entire studio output, which is around 7.5 hours. You can see that my overall grade across everything is 87, including, you know, some 10-minute drum solos. Led Zeppelin was I enjoy their live catalog as much or more than their studio catalog. I listen to it. Admittedly, I watch the videos more, the live videos, more than I listen to the live video songs, because I can just watch them and put those on, and they often surround sound, and it sounds better. But that does not diminish the live catalog. I do want to point out a couple things. The BBC tapes was 2 discs. They did release an extended version as part of their re-release package where they would add bonus content. I'll be honest, I don't own... This is the only one that I own. And the only reason I bought it is because the CDs from my original BBC sessions had failed and I couldn't listen to them. And so I decided to replace it and get the extended version. The third CD on this is highly lacking, in my opinion. Let's see if I can pull it up. Alright, so you can see I had the BBC sessions, and this is the original, the 2 CDs, and then we have the complete BBC sessions, and we can see that side disc 3 is, first of all, it's only 47 minutes, alright? The others were 80 minutes long, so we're adding 47 minutes. But look at the thing. So, number 1, we have a version of What Is and What Should Never Be that sounds like a terrible bootleg. It's only got 1 star. Same thing with I Can't Quit You Baby, You Shook Me, and Sunshine Woman. These are all horrible sounding lives. Now, they did have a few songs in here that are pretty good. The most notable of these is White Summer. White Summer was a guitar instrumental that Jimmy Page brought with him from his Yardbird days. In fact, we go all the way back. We can see we have versions from the Yardbirds from their Little Games CD that came out in the late 60s, actually. And it was a 3 or 4 minute piece there when Jimmy started playing it. You can see I've got a couple bootlegs here. These are these real low quality ones. But it was also part of the Royal Albert Hall show that shows up on the live DVD, where it's like a 12-minute piece, and it's okay. This version that shows up on the third CD of the BBC sessions is the only version that's available on their live CD releases. So that's notable, but that's about it. We've got versions of What Is and What Should Never Be that are better. We got versions of Communication. All these other songs, there are versions of them that are better. So for me, that third disc is not a very good value. And that's what my reaction has been to all of the extended releases by Led Zeppelin, where they added additional disc of bonus content. I've listened to some of them on Spotify and things like that. I'm not buying them because it's not worth it, and I've already owned 8 zillion versions of, as you can tell, I own 8 zillion versions of all these songs already. Sorry, that was a side rant. Anyway, I go back to my point is, if I were to suggest to somebody, I would tell them start with the extended version of The Song Remains the Same, because that captures the essence of them, in my opinion. And then I would get the BBC tapes, because that second CD is just that same thing, just great. Captures them at their peak, doing their best. But honestly, none of these are bad. None of these are bad buys. Not one of them. It's kind of up to you what you think is best. But all of it's high quality. And So that's what I got. An hour and 19 minutes in. Please, if you are here, thank you. I love you guys for watching. Hit that like button. Hit the like button. Even better yet, hit the subscribe button so that you'll know when the Rock and Roll Soapbox is coming out with more content. So appreciate it. Love you guys. I'm out.